But keep in mind, Paige Beckers has another year of eligibility should she choose to take it, which I think would be her 9th year at UConn, if I'm not mistaken. Right? I think she was Rebecca Lobo's roommate freshman year.
Welcome to Wait, What? Sports Biz Chat with DP and McGhee, the podcast that takes a unique look at the business of sports, sometimes irreverent, often cynical, and on occasion even serious. I'm your co-host, David 𝘠𝘪𝘆.
And I'm Tim McGhee.
We are at Mets House, and we want to say a big thank you to the New York Mets for inviting us down to Union Square at the corner of 14th Street and Union Square Park West. This is an awesome setup they have here to get merch and see videos and so forth, and listen to us.
We're thrilled to be here doing this for the first time outside of our illustrious studio.
We normally record this. So
Obviously, tons going on with this, as I said,
partial opening day, but Tim, I'll throw it over to you. And I mentioned this to you earlier. I have high expectations that you've brought your A game in terms of material.
Yeah, thanks for the pressure, David. And thank you to the New York Mets for hosting us today. With all due respect to baseball, I think we have to start by talking about March Madness. A couple of things. First of all, the selection Sunday, I think there was a lot of controversy, specifically around the selection of UNC, which, and you know, I've been a UNC fan for a long time. But it got, as many things do, it went from the sublime to the ridiculous very quickly. The governor of West Virginia, Patrick Morrisey, and the AG have already called for an investigation because West Virginia was not selected for that. Now, we don't like to get political on this show, right? I will say that West Virginia is dead last in education. It's dead last in healthcare. It's in the bottom 10 states for infant mortality rate. I would think that honorable man in Morgantown, West Virginia would have better things to spend his time on. But I'd love to get your thoughts.
It is a very controversial selection, particularly because of the chair of the committee on the men's side being the AD at Carolina,
Bobby Clemens.
yeah. And he said he
recused himself in any decision. And you're closer to this world than I am, so maybe he did. But it doesn't
looked great because they only had
one win against one of those top opponents, right? Whereas West Virginia
One
had
upon
6.
Right.
So if you look at that,
you know,
net system that they use, it does seem a little like it was a tough choice. Now,
as an ACC guy, that the fact that the ACC had to basically beg to get a 4th team in when the SEC has 14 teams, you, of course, I've been
ruminating over the last few days
whether or not I was going to give you credit for your prediction of 13 SEC teams making the tournament this year, because he got 14 in. Price of Right rules would suggest that I give it to him, right? Because he was over, or maybe it's the other way around. I'm not sure. But he predicted 13. They got 14, which of course is a record. The previous record being the Big East with 11 a few years ago. So, or back in 2011, I guess.
Yeah, I have to be less specific in my predictions going forward. I did say that the SEC would set a record for the number of teams. I was correct in that. I said there would be 13. There are 14. I'll go on record again and said that when all is said and done in early April, an SEC team will not be one of the teams cutting down the nets in San Antonio. And I will stick by that.
I now think Florida's the best team.
I'm going with the 1 seeds to make it this time, which I've never done before, but those are really strong teams.
Can we talk about
Louisville for a second? Being a 7 seed, which is
so strange.
8, absurd.
So it's totally absurd.
But
man, the ACC just
respect this year.
They win their first game, then they would get the winner of the Auburn game, which is most likely going to be Auburn. A couple other things. First of all, the tournament is sold out from a media perspective. So it's interesting because last year, if you recall, the women's finals did a much better rating than the men's final. We had Caitlin Clark against Dawn Staley and South Carolina. We don't have that this year, right? We don't have Caitlin Clark. We don't know who those teams are going to be, but it'll be interesting. I think there's a lot more excitement on the men's side this year.
I wouldn't call it a controversy.
Out of the women's bracket was the fact that they put USC and Connecticut in the same group, Connecticut being a 2 seed, and USC being the 1 in that. I mean, it would have been amazing to see players of the caliber of Paige Beckers and Juju Watkins playing in a Final Four. But I mean, the talent on the women's side has just gotten so strong, and it should be a great tournament again. I agree with you, though, there's a lot of enthusiasm on the men's side, and I think it's going to do great numbers.
Cooper Flagg is supposed to be playing on Friday. They may hold him out till Sunday, but he will be back this weekend. Keep in mind, Paige Beckers has another year of eligibility should she choose to take it, which I think would be her 9th year at UConn, if I'm not mistaken. Right? I think she was Rebecca Lobo's roommate freshman year. And then Juju Watkins is only a sophomore. And so she's got a couple more years. So conceivably, you could see that again. But I want to give a shout out, talking about the women's side. Vic Schaefer, who's the women's coach at the University of Texas, is what we would call here in New York a match. There were 3 student journalists who drove 16 hours to cover the SEC championship game. When Vic Schaefer found out about it, he went to those 3 student journalists and said, guys, put me on your resume as a reference. And any job you're going for, I'm happy to provide you a reference. And I know Coach Schaefer a little bit from my work with the Naismith, and it's just, I just thought that was an outstanding gesture on his part.
You know, sports still turns out
Stories, and it's nice to see that even in this time, particularly on the college side with the transfer portal and NIL and people complaining about the players making too much money, and in some cases rightfully so. It's just still wonderful to hear stories like that, for sure. And I expect to hear several more of those as the tournament progresses. So because it is, as I said, kind of opening day, it is opening day. The Mets don't open until next week. They're in Houston next Thursday. Is that right? Okay.
full disclosure, I'm a Cubs fan.
They played over in the Tokyo series. This is the kind of stuff that gets me so excited that the major sports leagues are doing, taking the game on the road and doing something. Obviously, a massive fan base, not just because of Ohtani. Obviously, both the Dodgers and the Cubs started Japanese pitchers today. Cubs lost 4-1, unfortunately, but hey, there's always tomorrow. Okay, he's breaking out the Mets sack.
Now, there is a baseball.
I want to talk about that just kind of makes me laugh, and that's this new era overlap cap story. And fortunately, neither the Mets nor the Cubs were part of the insanity, but we like to take on these stories sometimes on the show, and it's like, who the hell was looking at this stuff? My favorite one was the Texas Rangers, who had Texas, and they put the T for Texas over the X of Texas in the word, and it spelled what was a Spanish language vulgarity. And then the Astros, which I thought was great because it basically made it look like Astros, which I thought was really funny, and that kind of fit, right?
Yeah, I think Brian Cashman is the one who approved that one.
And then the other one was the Angels, which had I don't even want to say it. It was like, how is that not seen?
Yeah, it seems that we have 2 years in a row where there's been controversies with the uniforms. 3 years or 3 points make a trend, so we'll have to wait to see what happens next year. But I want to go across the pond for a minute.
Yeah.
Big news in Premier League. Well, 2 big pieces of news in the Premier League. First one is that Man U is going to build a new stadium, take the place of Old Trafford, which, when you think about all of the traditions in English football, that's a big deal. There's a question of what's going to happen with Old Trafford, whether they're going to use it for the women's team and academy clubs, but they might tear it down as part of a multi-use thing. So that's going to be the biggest stadium in the UK. It's going to beat Wembley. It's going to have over 100,000 people. The other big news coming out of the Premier League, Ted Lasso's coming back for season 4. So I don't know about you, but I'm really excited about that.
Unbelievable show.
Time to take a break and bring our guest in.
Go ahead and give it away. It's going to be someone with the Mets. We'll be right back.
It's time for our guest.
We are really pleased to have our guest today here with us live at Mets House. Bobby Clemens is the Vice President of Creative and Creative Director for the New York Mets. Welcome, Bobby. Before we get started, I want to tell a quick story that ties together your roots at St. John's University and the New York Mets. So if you'll indulge me for just a minute. For many years, the New York Mets used to invite me to opening day. They would have a party every day out in the outfield behind center field at Chase Stadium, and I was looking after one of their sponsors. And so very early in my career, I worked on some projects here in New York City where I got to meet what I call the Irish Mafia, guys like Jack Kaiser, the longtime athletic director of St. John's University, Tommy Kearns, who was a very successful Wall Street guy, but was probably best known in the world of basketball for the guy who jumped center against Wilt Chamberlain in the 1957 national championship game where Frank McGuire's UNC Tar Heels upset Will Chamberlain and the Kansas Jayhawks. But through my work with these guys, I met Coach 𝘠𝘪𝘵. And one year at the opening day party out in the outfield at Shea Stadium, I was walking by and Coach 𝘠𝘪𝘵 was talking to Ray Kelly, who at the time was the commissioner of New York City Police Department. And as I was walking by, I saw Coach 𝘠𝘠𝘵 put a finger up in front of Ray Kelly as in, give me a minute. And he came over and he gave me a big hello. And he, as he always would, he would call me Timmy. How's it going, Timmy? And we talked and caught up for a couple of minutes. And he said he had to get back to his group. And before he left, he took me by the hand and he said, Timmy, never pass the ball in from out of bounds. You'll never get it back. And 20-something years later, I still don't know what he means. I think I do, but I'm not sure. But coming from Coach 𝘠𝘠𝘵, it was sheer profundity.
Yeah, you're
And
scratching your head
interestingly,
all these years later.
right. And interestingly, the other day in the St. John's game in the Big East tournament, they passed the ball in from out of bounds, and the play was designed to get the ball back to the inbounder, who scored an easy basket. So in that particular case, Coach 𝘠𝘠𝘵 was not right. But
Yeah.
anyway, I digress. Let's get going with Bobby. So, Bobby, tell us about your role as creative director with the New York Mets. What's a typical day like for you?
So I tell everybody all the time, I think being creative director for the Mets is it's different every day. And I think that's what I love most about it. One day I'm on a podcast with you guys here at Mets House. The next day we're producing documentaries and getting ready for the season. And, you know, we were in spring training for about a month and a half, and we can get into that in a bit. But I think a typical day is not typical. It's not the same every day. It's one day we're working on our podcast show, Meet the Apple, and Amazing Stories with Jay. The next day we're working on a Juan Soto documentary, which hopefully everybody in here has checked out or is thinking about checking it out on YouTube. So I would say my day is different every day, and I get to work with basically everybody in the whole company. We act as almost a creative agency for the whole company. So it's really exciting every day.
So, Bob, you just shared a lot in that opening answer, which was wonderful. But dive a little deeper into this. How does a concept for, say, a short form video start, and how do you bring it through to fruition?
Yeah, so we have a social media team. So when you say short form content, the stuff you see on our Instagram channels, the quick, Brendan Noah getting a surprise gift that's always fun. Anything shot with a cell phone is usually our social media team. So when you say short form content to me, it's I'm thinking more of minute and a half, 2-minute pieces. So our video that plays every day before the team takes the field, it's a team on field video. We call it. Those basically, the first thing we're thinking of is what's the message, right? What are we trying to do with this video, whatever we're creating at that time, whether it is for ticket sales or it is to drive brand or brand awareness. That's the first thing that we're looking at first. Okay, what is the message that we want to get across? The next is what's our target audience, right? Are we going after children and families? Who do we want to watch this? And then it's really open to the floor, right? So yeah, I come up with a ton of ideas, but I will take an idea from anybody, because the one thing with our creative team is we'll come up with the idea. The final product will look nothing like what the original idea was. We'll always take it to a different level throughout. So huge collaborative process when coming up with those kind of ideas.
I know you said that true short form content is developed by the social media team, and I know they have their own measurement for success, engagement, likes, and so forth. But how do you judge the success of the content that you and your team create?
Definitely does depend on those numbers on social, right? We want the views, we want the impressions, but it's also, we're all Mets fans. Most of the department that works for the Mets in the creative department are Mets fans, if not all of them. So I feel like when we create a piece, we know if this is going to resonate, right? So if we create a piece and I show it to a colleague that didn't work on that specific one and the hairs on his arms are raising, we know we did something right here, right? We know that's going to help with brand awareness. We know that's going to entertain the Mets fans. But I think as far as strong numbers go, we want to see that on our social channels. We want to see the impressions. We want to see the views, and then you really figure out what Mets fans like. I'll tell you what, some of the most highly produced videos that we do, don't perform as well is when Pete Alonso hits a home run on a Tuesday night game. You know, Mets fans want to see their team win. We're in New York. That's what it's all about. So it's kind of making sure you have a mix of that, you know, the baseball and the off the field.
So that was a really interesting point, Bobby, you know, talking about the hardcore fans wanting to see that next Pete Alonso home run. But as you kind of touched on there, you have a bigger audience that you're constantly trying to build and bring into your world. So talk a little about that in terms of how your team manages both sides of that.
If you come out to our games or look at our social channels, you'll see, we call it off the diamond content. You'll see us filming our players walking in their outfits. We've done pieces with Francisco Lindor and his style. We've done food pieces where we've had Action Bronson come to the park, and so we focus a ton on off the field content, because as much as we want to appeal to Mets fans and the diehard, we want to make sure we're bringing in new fans to this program as well. So that's a huge initiative. Yep.
Bobby, we have to ask you about Grimace. How did the whole Grimace phenomenon come about?
Absolutely huge last year. So the real story is we reached out to McDonald's in 2023. We have a producer of our podcast, actually, 𝘍𝘰𝘶𝘴𝘪𝘥𝘦, reached out to McDonald's because for some odd reason he was just a fan of Grimace. This is before Grimace became a thing. They responded back and they were like, oh, you know, we'll look at it, we'll see. You know, oddly enough, in the next 2 weeks, the whole Grimace shake thing went viral. So now Grimace became a thing. You know, Grimace was.
We still haven't heard back from them. And then a couple weeks later, we saw that McDonald's had done something with Grimace, and he showed up. So we reached back out, and you know, on our team, reached back out, asked them to come, and then Grimace shows up and doing the first pitch, and then you know, we did not expect that to happen. What happened last year? You know, Grimace became our mascot. You had Mr. Met with Grimace last year. It was so that's the story of how Grimace came about.
Yeah, it truly was one of those just great things that exploded on the scene and everybody knew about it. So hats off to you and the team for capitalizing on it, for sure, because it was a lot of fun. Okay, give us a little hint on, as the season's about to start for the Mets, what should fans be looking for your team? Any content ideas coming out? And we have to ask, what do you have planned around this unbelievable signing of Juan Soto?
We'll get to the Soto stuff in a second, but we're focusing on longer form pieces on YouTube, you know, anywhere from 5 to 25 minutes. That's going to be a huge initiative. We filmed some really cool stuff in spring training, and some behind the scenes footage that we're working on a show for. I don't want to give too much away yet, but we'll see that in the next few weeks. So you can really expect a lot more of that storytelling content that we see in what I mentioned before, the Juan Soto documentary. So with Juan coming, you know, to the team, obviously, we paid him a lot of money to come, so we have to figure out. You know, we got to make sure that we market him right and create content that's going to resonate with our fans. So we produced this documentary called The Pursuit, where it's a 2-part docuseries. It's about 25 minutes each episode.
He's been a willing partner in all of that?
He has. So as you can imagine, Juan in spring training has been bombarded by everyone and anyone, not just fans. I'm talking about media and all that. So he's been a little quiet. Great guy, really nice, easy to work with. So that's one of the questions I've been getting every day. How was Juan to work with? He was awesome, and I think he's going to be just fantastic, you know, in our content throughout the year. And it's funny, that documentary. I walked into our senior editor's office, so his name is 𝘍𝘰𝘶𝘴𝘪𝘏, and I said, "Hey, Mo, I want to put together a 5-minute mid-form documentary that shows the pursuit of Juan Soto." So we started working on that now. We have a lot more here. We need to leave in. I mean, because we started talking to Soto, you know, when David Stearns was hired. That was one of the questions Steve asked me. Like, hey, what's your plan when this guy becomes a free agent? So we have to tell that whole story. So a 5-minute mid-form piece turned into a 2-part docuseries.
Wow.
25 minutes each.
That's great.
So just a follow-up question about the Soto documentary. A lot of times documentaries take a significant amount of time from conception through execution until viewers see it on the air. You guys put this together really quickly. What were some of the special challenges that you faced in pulling it together so fast?
Yeah, that was the biggest challenge. Is that we didn't have a lot of time, right? We wanted to make sure we did this thing in spring training before Warren plays a game at City Field or in Houston. So it took resources. We did this completely in-house. Besides one interview, because we were down spring training, we had 𝘐𝘯𝘪𝘵𝘵 from that one. So it was 2 editors all day, sometimes all night, working on this thing for 2 straight months. We got real lucky because we had an amazing day where we had a huge event at the ballpark where all the players showed up and alumni and everybody. So we knocked out all of the interviews that day. And that's a struggle because when you bring it back, remember, sometimes somebody says something that you're like, oh, crap, I got to recover this guy again because of what he mentioned. Luckily, they were all in house, so we're doing these interviews, and we film with 𝘍𝘪𝘵𝘆, and then we film with David Stearns, and Stearns mentioned something like going back and grab 𝘍𝘪𝘵𝘆. I'm like, you got to sit down again, film this. But a lot of work, 2 months straight, and really just focusing on that project.
Kudos to you and your team. I think the first episode's great.
Thank you.
So before we let you go, there's 2 questions we ask every guest that comes on the show. First one is,
Where'd your career get started? Where'd you started?
Okay, funny story there.
we like those.
Yeah, so I was dating my girlfriend at the time, who was not my wife, and her father knew somebody at Madison Square Garden in their video department. So he reached out and said, hey, my daughter's working something for an internship. And this is a long time ago. I've been with the Mets for 17 years now. So, and the guy goes, I don't have anything for him, but I know somebody over at the Mets that might. I can at least get him an interview. Can't promise anything. So I did an interview with the Mets, and I ended up starting out in there as an intern. I interned for 2 years in their scoreboard and entertainment department. So I was helping run the scoreboards at Shea Stadium for 2 years. And that's really where I got my foot in the door. And I worked, for the scoreboard team for a bunch of years. And then the scoreboard team back then was very much handling a lot of the content besides the at-home stuff. But we created everything for the scoreboards. We created everything for TV spots and radio spots. And then over the last, handful of years, we kind of just took everybody who was creating all that content and made a real creative department and left the scoreboard team on their own. That's kind of what I had to like the creative.
Yeah, that's terrific. That's a really great story, and unbelievable that you continue to pursue and have been able to make that kind of a career there. I will say this, a little advice for everybody listening. It's never good to start a story saying the woman I was dating at a time, like reflecting on a story about someone you were dating that didn't become your wife. It never ends well that way. So you handled it well because you obviously married her. So that's good.
Probably made up a story.
So the final question is, one piece of advice that you'd give someone that's looking to break into the sports business?
Yeah, I tell this to my staff to go out, make the contacts, meet anybody you can meet. And then once you know them, learn as much as you can from them. That's what I do to this day. I tell my employees and staff too, it's like, work for the next job you want. What do you want to do next? So if it's I want to be promoted and be a lead graphic designer, what's the lead graphic designer doing now that you're not doing? Take some steps to do that. And for me, it's like, I'm a creative director now, so there's not anybody kind of above me now in creative. So what I do is I reach out to creative agencies. I have CD New York, which is the top creative agency in the world. Learning from the next person. Bobby, what can you be doing that they're doing that's going to make you better? And that goes all the way down. When you want to get into this business, meet everyone, and you'll be able to break into it.
That's great advice. Bobby, can't thank you enough for taking time. I know how busy you are, and particularly at this time of the year as you're getting ready for the start of the season. So just on behalf of David and myself, just want to thank you for coming in.
Of course, thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thanks a lot, Bobby. All right, we will take a quick break here and be right back to close out the show. Talk to you in a sec.
We are back. thank you again to Bobby Clemens of the New York Mets for joining us. What a great guest.
Absolutely.
So, David, now is the time in the show where we take a look forward or we give shout outs. What's on your mind?
Well, first of all, I'm super excited now about the beginning of Major League Baseball season, given this great reception we've received here at Mets House and this exciting pop-up they have in Union Square Park, or right off of Union Square Park. So that is getting me fired up. And it's a beautiful day outside. It looks like still a little cold, but gorgeous here in New York City. I want to start with I don't know if it's a shout out, it's more of a tribute to John Feinstein, who is, in my opinion, one of the great, we think about some of the old school sports writers from years gone by, like eons ago. Feinstein was one of those. He was a legend. He was a difference maker in the sports journalism thing. He passed away last week, author of some amazing books, most well known for Season on the Brink, which was the inside look at Bobby Knight, which exposed a lot of the things that we learned about Bobby Knight after it became a movie with Brian Dennehy, perfectly cast. And it was almost amazing that Knight let him get that access, because he really revealed a lot. But for anyone that wants to read a very entertaining sports book, I encourage you to pick up A Good Walk Spoiled about the PGA Tour, which is an amazing book. And I had a quick story about John when I was an intern in the ACC office years ago. And he was fairly young, because he died very young, working the beat. He was a Duke grad, and he was covering the ACC tournament. And I was an intern putting the name tags down. And I remember saying to him, Mr. Feinstein, and he did the classic old line, Mr. Feinstein's my father, I'm John, which I think, because he was already a big time guy, and he was catered to there in the ACC because he was becoming quite well known. Anyway, sorry about his passing. I'm obviously looking forward to watching the NCAA. There's a story that I'm just going to touch on, and that's NWSL season just kicked off. They've announced a new related distribution deal with Roku about an NWSL zone that fits within their sports zone. It'll tie in all of the broadcasters they have, which is CBS, Amazon Prime, Prime Video, and ESPN, and Scripps, I believe. So I'm interested to see how that story plays out. Importantly, though, I'm also heading to Chicago this weekend for my grandson Jamie's 3rd birthday. So that's kind of the main thing I'm looking forward to. Yeah, I really talk about time flying.
Yeah, John Feinstein was a legend, and interestingly, I read an interview with him where he talked about how he got into the inner sanctum with Bobby Knight, and basically what it came down to is a bunch of other people who Bobby Knight respected vouched for John Feinstein. But the one thing that really endeared John to Coach Knight was when Bobby Knight threw that chair famously against Purdue. And John Feinstein had to cover it. But what he said was, in sort of the grand scheme of things, with all of the things that are wrong with college sports, that's maybe not even in the top 10. And he said he got a note from Coach Knight that said, thanks for not killing me, which I thought was great. Season on the Brink was great. It followed the 85-86 team, which famously lost in the first round to Kevin Mackey's Cleveland State. And that Indiana team had Steve Alford, Delray Brooks. They had some good players. They had a good season. And then Cleveland State had a little bit of run. But I did read something I want to take a little bit of exception to when somebody covering Feinstein's passing said that Season on the Brink was sort of the first book where an author embedded himself with the team through an entire season. I take exception to that because I had the pleasure of meeting David Halberstam back in the late 90s. He was very good friends with Bill Walton. And that friendship came from the book that David Halberstam wrote on the 79-80 Portland Trailblazers, which is called The Breaks of the Game. So Feinstein wasn't the first, but he certainly was one of the best. With that, I think, you and I are looking at the same things. Big dance starts tonight with UNC playing San Diego State in the out-bracket game, and then in Dayton, and there's another game tonight as well. And then Thursday, everything kicks off around the country. So really excited about that. Excited for opening day. And want to give a shout out again to Mets House for hosting us today. It's on the corner of 14th Street and Union Square West.
The pop-up shop is open every day but Monday, and it will be here until the end of May. So if you're in New York, stop in. It's a wonderful retail experience. So if you like the show, please subscribe, like, comment, tell your friends. We'll be back next week, but until then, he's DP, I'm McGhee, and we'll talk soon.